Panama was invaded by the world's greatest military power just a few days before Christmas. And just like the fire that spiraled out of control after the bombings, that Christmas Eve still burns in the memory of the Panamanian people. I'm Fish, and today we're going to look at Operation Just Cause, the day the United States carried out the invasion of Panama. Panama before the invasion. In the year 1968, a significant military coup, which was carried out by the National Guard, forcefully overthrew President Arnulfo Arias Madrid, just a mere 11 days after he had officially taken office as the newly elected president of the country. Thus began a long dictatorship, led by General Omar Torrijos, a charismatic figure who consolidated military power in the country while negotiating the return of the Panama Canal with the United States. Torrijos ruled Panama with a firm hand, but with a populist image. Although he was not democratically elected, he had support among broad sectors of the population. His role was crucial for the signing of the Torrijos-Carter treaties in 1977, which guaranteed the return of the Panama Canal by the end of 1999. His story ended abruptly after his mysterious death in 1981, when the plane he was traveling in crashed in the province of Cocle, under circumstances that were never fully clarified, and that's where his right-hand man in intelligence, Manuel Noriega, enters the scene. There was talk of internal tensions within the defense forces, and even of the discomfort he represented for power sectors, both inside and outside the country. Torrijos' death left a leadership vacuum that would be exploited by a colder, more calculating, but much less popular man, Noriega, the then head of military intelligence. From then on, the country's course changed radically. Noriega was not a leader of the masses or a charismatic speaker. He was a silent operator, an expert in undercover operations and political manipulation. He had trained in foreign academies, and during the Torrijos years, he directed the country's intelligence services. After Torrijos' death, Noriega moved quickly, neutralized rivals within the defense forces, and assumed total control in 1983, naming himself Commander-in-Chief. From then on, he ruled from the shadows, installing puppet presidents while he concentrated the real power. Panama was transformed into an oppressive state. Noriega had eyes and ears everywhere. The intelligence services monitored opponents, topped communications, and controlled the media. His authority didn't come from ballot boxes or speeches, but from the fear he instilled in the people. One of the most emblematic cases of the regime's brutality was the murder of Hugo Spadafora, who openly criticized Noriega and exposed his involvement in drug trafficking. Spadafora was detained in 1985 while trying to enter the country through the border with Costa Rica. Days later, his body appeared inside a sack floating in the river. The cruelty of the crime and its political nature marked a point of no return. Many Panamanians who still doubted the extent of Noriega's authoritarianism understood that dissent was paid for with one's life. For years, Noriega was a strategic ally of the United States. Since the 1970s, he maintained close ties with the CIA. He was considered a valuable asset. He reported on guerrilla movements, facilitated undercover operations in Central America, and served as an intermediary for Washington's plans during the Cold War. The United States knew that Noriega was authoritarian, that his power was absolute, and that he had dealings with drug trafficking. But as long as he performed certain favors, like supporting the Contras in Nicaragua or curbing leftist movements in the region, everything was tolerated. Panama, strategically located and with the canal under joint surveillance, was too important to risk a confrontation. But that relationship of convenience had an expiration date, because little by little, Noriega would become a bigger and bigger problem for the United States. Break with the United States. The relationship between Noriega and the United States began to break down in the late 1980s, when Washington could no longer ignore the obvious. Its old collaborator was too involved in drug trafficking. In 1987, US President Ronald Reagan imposed sanctions on Panama after years of having backed Noriega's regime. In response, Noriega tried to stir up anti-American sentiment among the Panamanian population. Through speeches, media outlets controlled by the regime, and organized marches, he promoted the idea that Panama was being victimized by a new form of foreign intervention. He sought to deflect attention from the accusations against him and reinforce his image as a defender of national sovereignty. In 1988, federal prosecutors in Florida filed formal charges against Noriega for money laundering and direct links to the Medellin cartel. For the first time, a de facto head of state was being charged in United States courts as a common criminal. From then on, international pressure on the regime grew, but he remained defiant. A year later, in May of 1989, Panama held general elections. The results were clear. The opposition candidate, Guillermo Endara, had won the elections, but Noriega annulled the results, alleging fraud, and unleashed a wave of brutal repression against opponents. The images of the beatings of the elected candidates traveled all around the world. This was the breaking point. The newly elected President George Bush demanded Noriega's immediate resignation, but he flatly refused.
I tell the Americans to their faces to stop threatening me because I am not afraid of death.
In October of that same year, what many consider the last great opportunity to avoid an invasion occurred. A group of officers from the Panamanian army itself, led by Moses Gioldi, carried out an attempted coup d'etat from the Albrook airbase, briefly managing to capture Noriega. But the plan failed due to a lack of support within the defense forces and the inaction of the United States, which, despite being aware of the operation, decided not to intervene. When those loyal to Noriega regained control, the retaliation came. The coup plotters were arrested, tortured, and executed without trial. This infamous day would be remembered as the Albrook massacre. Noriega not only survived, he emerged stronger and more paranoid than ever. From that moment on, he further hardened his anti-American rhetoric and withdrew into his own circle of power. On December 15th, the National Assembly, under Noriega's control, declared that Panama was in a state of war against the United States. This was a direct, unprecedented statement.
Without a third phrase, conspiracies, subtleties, or misinterpretations, because together we face this challenge.
Just one day later, the event that ignited the final spark occurred. On December 16, 1989, a United States officer died at the hands of Panamanian soldiers at a checkpoint in Panama City. 2 other military personnel were detained and mistreated. For Washington, this was enough. That incident, together with the recent official declaration of a state of war by the Panamanian regime, served as the pretext that President George Bush needed in order to officially greenlight and authorize the full-scale invasion of Panama. Just 4 days after these pivotal events, United States troops were already crossing the border into Panamanian territory. This marked the beginning of the largest United States military operation to take place since the Vietnam War, and the operation was now fully underway, involving thousands of American soldiers and significant military resources.
Last night, I ordered United States military forces to Panama. As president, I have no higher obligation to safeguard the lives of American citizens. And that is why I directed our armed forces to protect the lives of American citizens in Panama and to bring General Noriega to justice in the United States.
Operation Just Cause, the invasion of Panama. In the early morning of December 20th, 1989, while most of the country slept, Operation Just Cause began. Planes, helicopters, and ground units launched simultaneous attacks on strategic targets throughout the country. The sky over Panama City lit up with a brutal fire. The roar of the explosions pulled thousands of people out of bed. The primary targets were carefully selected. The Comandancia, headquarters of Noriega's defense forces, located in El Chorrillo, was one of the first targets to be bombed. The attack was devastating. In a matter of minutes, the heart of Panamanian military power was in ruins. In parallel, United States commandos stormed the Rio Hato base, where Noriega had a private residence and an elite brigade. Other teams took Tucumán Airport and the Paitilla airfield. where they destroyed his personal plane. They also took bridges, radio stations, and smaller barracks. The Panamanian defense forces tried to resist, but they were completely overwhelmed. The power imbalance was staggering. While Panamanian soldiers fired old rifles from makeshift trenches, it's total madness, man. On the other side, Apache helicopters, light tanks, and elite commandos with night vision arrived. Within hours, the Panamanian chain of command collapsed. Some soldiers surrendered, others fled, and a few continued fighting in urban areas, leading to isolated clashes in the city's streets and buildings. But the most tragic blow of the night wasn't military, it was civilian. The El Chorrillo neighborhood, located next to the headquarters, was caught in the crossfire. The intense bombardment sparked a fire that spiraled out of control, destroying entire blocks of wooden houses. The flames spread relentlessly. Residents fled as walls, roofs, and columns collapsed behind them. Many died without even understanding what was happening. Witnesses described the scene as a literal hell. Some called it Little Hiroshima. After the disaster, the surviving civilians from El Chorrillo were moved as refugees to the Clayton area, to a United States military base, where they were housed in makeshift conditions. Opinions on the fire's origin are divided. Some attribute it to the United States bombings, while others point to the Dignity Battalions, a paramilitary militia loyal to Noriega. In less than 24 hours, Noriega's regime was dismantled, but the cost was devastating. The city also experienced a wave of looting in shops, supermarkets, and public buildings. Some saw it as acts of desperation amidst scarcity and uncertainty, while others labeled it opportunistic vandalism. The streets of downtown Panama City, especially in areas like Caledonia and Santa Ana, were marked by broken storefronts, empty shelves, and a widespread sense of institutional vacuum. With the defense forces dismantled and the country under United States control, only one loose end remained: Manuel Antonio Noriega. The fall of Noriega. During the first days of the invasion, Noriega managed to escape. He moved from one hideout to another, while United States soldiers searched for him intensely. Finally, on December 24, 1989, Noriega appeared in an unexpected place: the Apostolic Nunciature, the Vatican Embassy in Panama. Sheltered under diplomatic immunity, no soldier could enter to take him out by force. So, the United States Army devised an unconventional strategy: a sonic war. They surrounded the nunciature with tanks and giant speakers. Day and night, at full volume, rock and heavy metal songs began to play. Bands like AC/DC and Guns N' Roses blasted through the speakers in an endless loop. Songs like Welcome to the Jungle were no longer just music, they were psychological pressure. The goal was very clear: to break Noriega's spirit and make him feel that the siege was total. The news of Noriega's whereabouts didn't take long to spread through the city. Soon, a crowd of enraged Panamanians began to gather in front of the Apostolic Nunciature. They were citizens fed up with years of repression, violence, and fear. They shouted, demanding his surrender, and some even asked to enter to be able to take him out by force.
If there's a large group that wants to enter by force, do you know what's going to happen to you? The same thing that happened to Mussolini. They caught him and they hung him and his mistress. So Noriega agreed, I'm going to come out.
Noriega was completely surrounded. Tanks in the street, speakers at full volume, even with a United States soldier pointing a machine gun at his window. There was no escape. Finally, after 10 days of siege, Noriega surrendered. Before coming out, he demanded that they bring him his general's uniform. He decided to surrender with the rank he still considered his own. He also wrote 2 letters. One addressed to his wife Felicidad, in which he said goodbye to her, saying, "Now I'm going on an adventure." And another sent to Pope John Paul II, expressing his gratitude for the protection provided, appealing to faith and divine forgiveness, highlighting that he believed he was innocent and that he had always acted in the best interests of the Panamanian people. On January 3, 1990, he left the embassy dressed in his military uniform and with a Bible in his hands. He was handed over to the United States Army, who were accompanied by DEA agents. Immediately, he was transferred to a military base and then flown to Miami, where charges for drug trafficking, money laundering, and organized crime awaited him. Thus ended the regime of Panama's strongman, not with speeches or negotiations, but with distorted guitars and handcuffs on his ankles. While the invasion was taking place, Guillermo Endara was sworn in as president, not at the Palacio de las Garzas, but inside the United States military base in Clayton. It was a symbolic scene. The dictatorship was falling, and with external support, a new era for Panama was beginning. One of his first decisions was to completely dissolve the defense forces, the army that had sustained the dictatorship for over 20 years, and in its place, a civil public force without a military structure was created. Panama thus renounced having an army, something that would remain until this day. The transition toward democracy was officially beginning. The new government restored institutions and called for free elections. It wasn't a perfect process, but it was the first step toward the reconstruction of the country. The fall of the dictatorship came at an enormous cost. Although the United States presented the invasion as a surgical operation, the reality on the streets of Panama was very different. Official figures speak of around 500 dead among Panamanian civilians and military, but human rights organizations claim that the real number could have been in the thousands. To this day, there is no definitive count. The hardest hit neighborhood, without a doubt, was El Chorrillo, practically leveled by the fires caused by the bombings. Thousands of people lost their homes over it. Many of them never recovered them. The city experienced days of chaos, with collapsed hospitals, food shortages, and hundreds of wounded without medical attention. It was, in practical terms, a humanitarian crisis. Years later, mass graves began to be found with unidentified buried bodies. To this day, there are dozens of missing persons whose whereabouts remain a mystery. The invasion provoked a wave of condemnation around the world. Just days later, the UN described it as a violation of international law. For many governments, Operation Just Cause was seen as a unilateral, disproportionate, and dangerous action, even if Noriega was openly repudiated. The debate between legality and legitimacy remained open. Was it justifiable to violate a country's sovereignty if the goal was to overthrow a dictator? Paradoxically, in Panama, the perception was very different. A large part of the population, fed up with the regime and without faith in an external solution, welcomed the invasion as a liberation. Polls at the time indicated that more than 80% of Panamanians supported Noriega's downfall, even if the price was high. Even so, for a long time, December 20th was a silent wound. The subject wasn't discussed, nor were there any official tributes. It wasn't until 2022 that the Panamanian government declared December 20th as a day of national mourning, finally recognizing the civilian victims of the invasion of Panama. Your turn. Do you think the invasion of Panama was justified, or was it a violation of international law? Do you have any memory of that Christmas in 1989? Leave your answer down here in the comments section.